Have you ever met someone who wasn't supposed to stay alive? I was born 4 times to the same mother. 3 times I died. The 4th time my mother refused to let me go. I think you deserve to know that some mothers don't just love their children. Some mothers pay for them. Quietly. For the rest of their lives. And nobody applauds that kind of love because nobody ever sees the price being paid. Today you will. My name is Morayo. This is my story.
There is a kind of child in our tradition that we do not name too quickly. In the Yoruba tongue, they call this child Abiku, born to die. In the Igbo tongue, they call this same child Ogbanje, the one who comes and goes. A child who is born smiling. A child who dies before his 2nd birthday. A child who is born again to the same mother, wearing the same face, carrying the same mark. My mother buried 3 of these children before I was born. I was the 4th, and I am the only one who lived long enough to find out why I kept coming back and what it cost the woman who finally made me stay. My name is Morayo. This is my story. And I am telling it exactly the way I finally understood it, which is not the way I understood it as a child, and not the way the village understood it either. Most of what they believed about me was wrong. What actually happened was worse and stranger, and in the end, it was not really my story at all. It was my mother's. My mother's name was Yeye Adunni, and by the time I was born, she had already buried 3 children. The first was a girl. She lived 11 months. My mother told me, much later, in the flat voice she used only for this subject, that the girl had been the happiest baby anyone in Oke-Igede had ever seen. Laughing at nothing, reaching for faces that weren't there, sleeping through the night from her 2nd week of life, which every exhausted mother in that village found almost supernatural in itself. Then one morning, without fever, without cough, without any of the ordinary warnings a village midwife knows to watch for, she simply did not wake up. My mother said the girl's face, even in death, kept its smile. The second was a boy. He lived 9 months. This time, there was a fever, sudden, burning, gone as quickly as it came, and my mother thought, for one terrible, hopeful week, that he had survived it. He hadn't. He died in his sleep 4 days after the fever broke. And when my grandmother washed his small body for burial, she found a mark near his left ankle that no one remembered him having before. A faint, dark shape, almost like a bird's foot pressed into the skin. The third was a girl again. She lived only 6 months, less time than either of the others, as though whatever was taking these children was growing impatient. She died the same way, no warning, no cause the local dispensary could name, and when they undressed her small body, the mark was there again, the same shape, the same place, left ankle. By the time this 3rd child was buried, the whispering in Oke-Igede had already started, though never in front of my mother directly. Yoruba villages have old instincts for a certain kind of grief, and they knew, the way old women always know these things before anyone says it aloud, that this was not 3 separate tragedies. This was one child, coming and going. My grandmother was the one who finally said the word no one else would. She sat with my mother after the 3rd burial, held her hands, and said very quietly, "Adunni, this child is Abiku. She has been playing with you." My mother did not answer. She told me later she could not, at the time, decide if she believed it, or if believing it was simply easier than accepting that her own body had failed 3 times for no reason at all. Either way, when she found herself pregnant a 4th time, she went, before she told even my father, to see Baba Ifagbemi. Baba Ifagbemi was, at that time, already an old man, though not yet as old as he would become by the time I was grown enough to understand any of this myself. He kept a small shrine at the edge of Oke Igede, near the crossroads where the village's two paths to the market met, and people visited him the way people visit any diviner in our tradition, quietly, at odd hours, carrying kola nuts and unspoken fear in equal measure. He cast Ifa for my mother that day. I was not there, obviously, since I did not yet exist in any form the living world could see, but he told me the story himself, years later, more than once, always in the same careful words, as though he had rehearsed how much of the truth a person could safely be given. Your mother sat across from me, he said, and I threw the chain, and before I even finished reading what fell, I felt a coldness come into the room that had not been there a moment before. Ifa does not always tell a diviner everything, but that day, he told me enough. What he told him, he said, was this: the child my mother now carried was the same spirit that had worn the three faces before her. Not a curse sent by an enemy, not a punishment for any sin my mother had committed. Simply a spirit child, one of the Abiku, who had made an agreement with her companions in the other world before she was ever born the first time. An agreement to come into this world only briefly, to taste it, to be loved by her mother, and then to return to her true companions, over and over, for as long as it amused her to do so. I told your mother the truth as gently as I could, Baba Ifagbemi said. I told her that this child could be made to stay. But making an Abiku stay is not the same as asking a stranger to stay for dinner. It requires convincing something that does not want to be convinced, and it is never free. My mother, he said, asked him only one question in return. What will it cost me? Baba Ifagbemi did not answer her that day. He told her instead to come back after the child was born, if the child survived long enough to be named. Because he said, some things Ifa will not reveal to a mother who has not yet held the child in her arms. Some prices are only shown to a woman once she has something to lose. I was born on a rainy morning in the season, the farmers call the second planting, and my mother told me she did not sleep for 3 full days afterward, simply watching me breathe, waiting for the silence that had taken her other 3 children. It did not come, not on the 3rd day, not on the 9th day, when custom demanded my naming ceremony, and not on the 41st day, when the old women of Oke Igede quietly agreed among themselves that if I had not gone by then, perhaps I truly meant to stay this time. Or perhaps 1 or 2 of them murmured, I was simply taking my time deciding. They named me carefully, the way you name a child you are afraid of losing. In our tradition, Abiku children are sometimes given names meant to discourage them from living again. Names like Malomo, meaning do not go again, or Koku Omo, meaning this one will not die again. Names that are really please dressed up as words, spoken over a baby who may or may not understand them, in the hope that the naming itself becomes a kind of binding. My mother did not choose one of these names for me. She chose Morayo instead. I have found joy, which Baba Ifagbemi told her years later might have been the first sign of how she intended to fight for me. Not with fear, not with warning names, with joy, deliberately, defiantly claimed, as though she could love me hard enough to make the living not worth it. I lived past my first birthday. I lived past my second, the age that had taken my brother and my second sister. My mother told me that on the morning after my second birthday, she woke before dawn and went outside and wept in the dark. Not from grief this time, but from something she said she almost did not recognize anymore. Relief, she thought at first, though later she would tell me it was something closer to fear of a different shape. Relief has an ending. What she felt did not, because surviving longer than my siblings did not mean I had stopped being what I was. The first strange thing happened when I was perhaps 4 years old, too young by any reasonable account to remember what I am about to tell you. And yet, I remember it as clearly as I remember writing this very sentence. I was sitting with my mother while she plaited another woman's hair in the compound, half listening to the women talk the way small children do, catching only fragments, when I said, without any warning to myself or anyone else, Bunmi used to sing that song too. The compound went quiet in a way 4-year-olds notice, even when they don't understand why. Bunmi was my second sister's name, the girl who died at 6 months old, whose face I had never seen, whose name I had never once been told, because my mother, understandably, did not speak her dead children's names in front of me if she could help it. My mother's hands stopped moving in the other woman's hair. What did you say, Morayo? Bunmi, I said again, as though it were the most ordinary thing in the world. She used to hum that same tune when she was falling asleep, the one Auntie is humming now. I do not remember, even now, where that knowledge came from. I only remember the look on my mother's face, and the way the other women in the compound found sudden aging business elsewhere, and the way, for the rest of that day, my mother held my hand slightly too tightly whenever we walked anywhere together. It was not the last time this happened. Over the years that followed, in small, unpredictable moments, I would say things I had no way of knowing. I named the spot by the river, the twisted iroko tree at the bend where the water ran fastest, and told my mother, with a child's simple certainty, that I did not like that tree, that it remembered me, though no one had ever taken me there, and no one had ever warned me away from it. Later I learned that this was the exact tree beneath which my grandmother had buried protective charms after my brother's death, in a desperate, failed attempt to keep his spirit from returning a third time. I began, without meaning to, without wanting to frighten the very people who loved me most. It was Iya Faramade, the same old woman who years later would be the only person in Oke Igede brave enough to say aloud what everyone else only whispered about another matter entirely, who first spoke to me directly about what I was. I was perhaps 7 years old. She found me alone by the compound wall one evening, sat beside me without asking permission, the way old women in our tradition never feel they need to ask, and studied my face for a long, uncomfortable moment before she spoke. You know, you are not like the other children, she said. It was not a question. I remember feeling, even at 7, a strange mixture of fear and relief. Fear of being seen so plainly. Relief that someone had finally said it out loud, instead of only trading worried glances over my head. Am I a bad thing? I asked her. It was the only question that mattered to me at that age. Iya Faramade considered this carefully, the way she considered most things, as though every answer she gave might be weighed against her somewhere after death. I do not think you are a bad thing, she said finally. I think you are a thing that does not yet know its own mind. The Abiku who come to us are not devils, small one. They are travelers who have not decided whether this world is worth staying in. Some are cruel about the deciding. Some are only curious. I do not yet know which kind you are, and I suspect you do not know either. How would I know? You will know, she said, the day your companions come to remind you of the agreement you made before you were ever born. And on that day, small one, you must decide with your whole chest whether you wish to keep it. I did not understand her then. I would understand her in the worst possible way only a few years later. On the night, my spirit companions finally came to collect on a promise I had no memory of making, and my mother discovered exactly how far she was willing to go to make sure I broke it. That was the night I found the mark on my own ankle for the first time. Iya Faramade told me that evening by the compound wall that I would know the day my companions came to remind me of my agreement. She did not tell me it would come disguised as an ordinary fever on an ordinary night in the middle of the Harmattan season, when every child in Oke Igede was coughing from the dust in the air, so that no one, not my mother, not the local dispensary nurse, not even Baba Ifagbemi at first, understood they were looking at something other than dry season sickness. I was 11 years old. This is the part of my story I remember most clearly, because it is the part where I stopped being a child who occasionally frightened people with things she shouldn't know, and became something my mother finally had to fight for with her whole life. The fever started on a Thursday. By Thursday night, I was burning the way my mother told me my brother had burned. All those years before I was born, a heat that made no sense against the cool Harmattan wind blowing through the compound, a heat that no cold cloth or bitter leaf paste seemed to touch. But the fever is not what I remember most. What I remember is the visitors. I want to be careful here, because I know how this sounds, and I have spent long enough being disbelieved by people who loved me to understand the temptation to simply call it a child's fever dream. But I was there. I am the only one who was there. And what I experienced in the several nights that followed was not the disordered logic of an ordinary dream. They came to me as children, my own age. There was something about the way they stood, too still, too patient, the way adults stand when they are waiting for something they already know will happen, told me even then that they were not children in any way that mattered. There were 3 of them, though I would later come to understand there had been more waiting elsewhere, that these 3 were simply the ones sent to speak with me directly. They did not threaten me. This is the part people misunderstand most about the Abiku tradition. The Egbe, our spirit companions, do not usually come as monsters. They come as the oldest, most familiar kind of comfort there is, as friends who have been waiting for you. You said you would only stay a little while, the tallest of them told me, in a voice that was almost gentle. You have already stayed longer than any of your other times. We have been patient. We are still your friends. But you made a promise, and promises made before birth are the ones that matter most. I don't remember making any promise, I told her. I am certain even now that it was a girl, though her face shifted slightly every time I tried to hold it steady in my memory, the way a face does in water. I don't even know your name. You knew it once, she said. You will know it again, very soon, when you come home. My mother did not wait for the fever to break on its own this time. By the second night of visitors, watching me speak to an empty corner of the room, in a voice she said did not sound entirely like mine, she carried me herself to Baba Ifagbemi's shrine before dawn. And this time, she did not leave until he told her everything. He explained it to her the way he later explained it to me, once I was old enough to sit through the telling, without flinching from every word. An Ogbanje, he said, using both names together now, the way he always did after that day. Ogbanje and Abiku, one tradition wearing 2 tongues, makes this agreement with the Egbe before it is ever born into a mother's body. It is a pact formed in the world the living cannot see, A promise between the spirit child and its companions that it will only borrow a mother's love briefly. Taste the world of the living the way a traveler tastes a foreign meal, and then return to where it truly belongs. Most Ogbanje children do not remember making this promise, he said, because the promise is not made by the mind we grow once we are born. It is made by something older, something that exists before the mind, before even the body. And that's precisely why it is so difficult to break. You cannot simply reason with a part of yourself that was formed before you had reasons. There are old methods, he told my mother, that our people have used for generations to try to convince a spirit child that living is not worth it. Some mothers give the child an ugly name, a name so undesirable that the Egbe lose interest in claiming it back, believing the spirit no longer wishes to be reunited with something so lowly named. Some mothers mark the child's body themselves before the Egbe can, cutting a small scar in a hidden place so that if the child dies and tries to return through another pregnancy, the mother will recognize the mark and know for certain and can act more quickly the next time. Some, in the old days, in the cruelest and most desperate cases, mutilated the body of a dead Ogbanje child before burial, hoping to shame the spirit so badly that it would refuse to wear that same broken shape again. My mother, he told me later, went very still at this last part. "Did you do this?" she asked him, "to any of my other children?" "No," Baba Ifagbemi said. "You never asked me to, and I would not have suggested it to you. That method is old and cruel, and I have never believed it does anything but wound a grieving mother twice over, once for the date and once for what she allowed to be done to a body she loved." "Then what," my mother asked him, "can be done for the one I have now, who is still alive, who is fighting something at night that none of us can see?" Baba Ifagbemi did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, he told her something that would shape the next several years of my life and hers more than either of us understood at the time. "There is a way to sever the pact entirely," he said. "Not to trick the Egbe, not to shame them, but to pay them directly, in a currency that satisfies the debt your daughter owes them, without her having to be the one who pays it. I have only seen it attempted twice in my lifetime. Once, it worked. Once, it did not." "Tell me what it costs," my mother said. "I will not tell you today," Baba Ifagbemi said. "Go home, sit with your daughter. Decide, truly decide, whether you are prepared to hear the answer. Because once I tell you, you will not be able to unknow it, and neither will she, one day, when she is old enough to understand what you chose on her behalf." I did not know any of this conversation had happened until years later. What I knew at 11 years old was only that on the fourth night of the fever, the tallest of my 3 visitors came to me one final time, and this time, she did not speak gently. "Your mother is asking questions she should not be asking," she told me. "Tell her to stop, or the price for your staying will grow larger than she can pay." I remember trying to ask what she meant, but the fever broke that same night. Suddenly, completely, the way it had come, and by morning, I was myself again, hungry, exhausted, and utterly unable to explain to my mother why I woke up crying her name before I had even opened my eyes. She held me for a long time that morning. I remember she was shaking, though she tried to hide it. And I remember she kept touching my ankle, gently, the way you check on an old wound to make sure it has not reopened. The mark was there. It had always been there, faintly, since I was small, but that morning, for the first time, it looked different to her, she told me years later. Darker, more defined, as though something had pressed its thumb into my skin overnight and left its print behind on purpose. I did not tell her then what my visitor had said about her questions. I did not fully understand it myself, and some instinct in me, even at 11, understood that repeating it would frighten her more than the fever already had. But I began, from that morning onward, to watch my mother the way she had always watched me. And what I noticed over the following months was that she began disappearing in the evenings, sometimes for an hour, sometimes longer, always toward the river, always alone, always returning with her eyes red and her hands trembling in a way she thought I did not see. I was 13 the night I finally followed her. I want to be honest about why I did it, because it was not bravery. It was fear, plain and simple. The fear of a child who has started to suspect that the adults around her are carrying a weight they refuse to name, and who would rather know the shape of the danger than continue guessing at its size in the dark. I found her at the river's edge, near the twisted iroko tree I had feared without explanation since I was small. The same tree beneath which my grandmother had once buried failed charms meant to keep my brother from returning a third time. My mother was kneeling in the mud at the base of it, a small clay bowl in front of her, and she was speaking, not praying exactly, though it had the rhythm of prayer, but something closer to bargaining. The desperate, specific bargaining of someone negotiating a debt. I could not hear all of it. The wind took most of her words toward the water before they reached me. But I heard enough. I heard her say a name I did not recognize, spoken with a kind of tenderness that confused me, because it was not spoken the way you speak to a stranger, or an enemy, or even a spirit you fear. It was spoken the way you speak to someone you love and are about to lose. And then, clearer than anything else that night, carried on a sudden gust that seemed almost deliberate in how precisely it delivered those words to me. I heard my mother say, "Take mine instead, but let her keep hers." I did not understand that night what she was offering, or to whom, or what hers meant, or why my mother's voice broke on the word mine in a way I had never heard it break before, not even at any of her other children's funerals. I only understood, standing frozen in the dark behind her, that whatever my mother was buying for me at that river bank, she had already decided the price was worth paying, and that she had no intention of ever telling me what it was. That's it for part 1 of this story. If you want to know what my mother truly gave up that night at the river, comment part 2 below and subscribe so you don't miss it. We drop new videos every week. Subscribing means a lot more than a number to me. It's how you help a storyteller who genuinely loves what she does keep doing it. Thank you for sitting with this one.